Opioid overdoses have surged across the country in recent years. Congress has set aside nearly $5 billion to help fight the opioid epidemic. The president has called for increasing education on the dangers of drug use and expanding access to treatment.
Here to talk more about the epidemic is Dr. Lloyd Sederer, an adjunct professor at the Columbia University Mailman School of Public Health. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
You've written many books on mental health, addiction, and your latest is called The Addiction Solution.
Yes.
When you say that, I mean, what are the first steps, do you think, in a solution?
Well, families often ask me, what do they do first? And what they have to do first is uncover and face the problem, which is very difficult. And they can do that by writing down, jotting down what they see, what they observe, not what they feel. For example, changes in sleep, irritable, blames other people, moods are up and down, thinking is muddled. Whatever it is, write these few things down as a way of remembering them for yourself and then to see whether they persist for a week or two. And if they do, turn to another person, a trusted other person who knows the same person, and say, here's what I'm seeing. Are you seeing it too? In other words, validate what you're experiencing, not what you're feeling, because that's going to be the foundation of gathering the courage, if you will, to talk with a loved one or a friend or someone else, a colleague at work, about what you're seeing. And that's the start of a conversation. Don't expect miracles. That's the whole goal of that is to say, here's what I'm seeing. Make no judgments and begin a conversation.
I want to go back for a minute and talk a little bit about prevention, because I think the scary thing about the opioid crisis is it affects people across races, across classes. What should families and parents keep in mind to prevent their child, their teenager, their college student from even getting into this in the first place?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there are proven programs that have to do with what's called positive parenting, which is something I had to learn. That took me a while, which means that instead of finding fault, criticizing, pushing your kids, you are positive with them about in every way possible, whether it's school, whether it's music, whether it's sports. Find ways to be positive with them, because that's actually protective. Kids that feel that their parents are on them are more apt to use drugs than those that are not.
One thing I found interesting in your book, too, because you talk about how sometimes parents turn a blind eye to drinking, drug use during adolescence. What is your advice?
Yes. Well, trust what you're seeing, and then you have to gather some courage, because it's going to be very hard to speak with a child or someone else about an addiction, because their first response is going to blame you. They're going to deny it and blame it. That's in the nature of the disease. So you have to gather that courage and begin the process.
And how about being active and being a good advocate?
That's so critical, because one of the things families want to do is press for good care. And what good care means is not just one simple approach to a condition. You wouldn't expect that with asthma or diabetes or cancer. And the same thing is true with addiction. So it has to do with medications that may reduce craving. It has to do with support groups like AA and NA. And therapy including what's called cognitive behavioral therapy, which is important because it is helpful with mood, and it's also helpful in preventing relapse, because people come to recognize what the cues, what the triggers are for their relapse.
And just important to know there are resources like yourself who help people if you find yourself in this situation.
Yes, but you have to work hard at it, because there's a big gap between the need and the available treatment. And sometimes you'll go to a program where you're offered only one thing. You have to press for more.
Right. Really have to research. Dr. Sederer, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for covering this subject.
You can find all of this great advice on our website, cbsnewyork.com.